Oh yeah! What up, party people? Bobbo here from BrassReel Brothers. Welcome back to the hot fresh popcorn special of BrassReel Halloween. For this episode, we're taking a trip back to the mediocre 90s with a movie that actually stood out that wasn't so mediocre.
The Frighteners.
Directed by Peter Jackson and produced by Robert Zemeckis, starring Michael J. Fox and a slew of other great actors. So in a decade where horror was almost gone, mediocre movies were being made left and right, we had a very ambitious director, pre-Lord of the Rings, come out with The Frighteners. At this point, Peter Jackson had not only had movies like Heavenly Creatures, Brain Dead or Dead Alive in the United States, and Bad Taste, and he had another movie called Meet the Feebles, and oh God. But Robert Zemeckis saw something in Peter Jackson and said, hey, run with this story. I want you to do something with it. And man, it just shows. Give Peter Jackson some money and he can actually do a great movie. Only thing that's bad about this movie is some of the effects. It was right on that edge of CGI when it wasn't where it needed to be yet. They were still working those kinks out. Hell, some movies are still working those kinks out today. Immediately, I love the opening of this movie. It combines all kinds of cool stuff, like a serial killer story, along with some poltergeist type things, along with like a mystery, a love story, some gothic sadistic stuff going on, comedy. I mean, it's a great movie. It's really, really good, underrated. I think one of the reasons it didn't do so well is I don't know if it was marketed properly or if it just didn't have that audience. Or like I was saying earlier, horror was kind of dead at the time, so I don't think people were jumping on horror films like they are now. I think if this movie came out today, it'd be a bigger deal. But basically, Michael J. Fox is this paranormal investigator who's kind of a con man. He sets up some things. So he can actually communicate with the dead, but nobody's really being haunted. So he fakes some hauntings with these two dead guys that he communicates with all the time. They're really funny. They're the comic relief of the film. Basically, all the ghosts are the comic relief of the film and what's scary about the film. But he's just trying to survive in life and do his thing and sort of make some money off of conning people with these ghosts. He makes these ghosts set up these situations in people's houses, and then they call him and he comes and exercises whatever poltergeist they have in there. The music's by Danny Elfman, which is great because he's an awesome gothic sounding. He did the original Batman and Batman Returns, did the Men in Black movies, did multiple other things, Beetlejuice, the Simpsons theme song, but you see where I'm going. He has that style that sounds perfect for this type of gothic film. Right from the opening of the movie, it's phenomenal cinematography, going to this haunted house type feel. It's got Dee Wallace in it from The Howling and other horror films as well. And you don't really know what's going on in this movie until you keep watching it, because it's not just an in your face, who's the killer, somebody's killing somebody. There's all kinds of things that are happening that you don't really know what's up, that need to get explained to you. Or you need to watch the movie and figure out. Basically, there's a Grim Reaper type character going around and killing people, and he's marking numbers on their heads, but that relates to a crime that happened in the past, way back in the day. And there's this killer who was played by Jake Busey, who was killing people with this girlfriend of his, carving numbers into their head every time he killed them. He was keeping score by he'd kill somebody and carve a number in their head. And Dee Wallace, at the beginning, plays the older version of the girl who was along with him. And Jake Busey's character got put to death. She didn't get killed and put to death. She just had to stay with her grandmother.
The wicked will be punished.
So all these things are happening, like these ghosts are trying to come back, and like I said, this Grim Reaper thing is killing people by grabbing their hearts and making it look like it's a heart attack. Michael J. Fox can see what's really going on, and he starts seeing these numbers are still carved into people's heads. Well, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the whole story, but that's just the premise of what's going on. And so there's all kinds of crazy stuff unfolding with ghosts everywhere. And again, the effects were fun at the time. They did work at the time, but they don't quite hold up. Some of them are all right, but then some of them are But the ambition is there, and the story's awesome. The story is really rich. Michael J. Fox does a great job of this. I think this was right before he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, or maybe he was living with it at the time and hadn't really been outspoken about it. But man, Michael J. Fox was such a good actor. He really had a huge career ahead of him. Like I really think that he could have done all kinds of different roles. It just sucks that his career was cut so short because of that frickin' disease. At the right time, if he would have been born a little later in life, he could have been a good Peter Parker, a good Spider-Man. But for a horror film, man, this crosses off a lot of boxes. Like, it has some lighthearted elements to where you're like, oh, this is kind of a fun horror film. And then you're like, ooh. And then sometimes it's like, oh, this is hilarious. Other times it's just kind of like, and then sometimes you're just like, the many expressions of Bobbo. So it just goes from gothic feeling to spooky haunted house, kind of like Addams Family a little bit. but then it goes like kind of feeling like Texas Chainsaw Massacre for a second. I mean, it's just got all kinds of cool stuff to it. Moments that get really gothic, kind of like Hellraiser for a second, and that's with Jeffrey Combs, which, by the way, Jeffrey Combs is awesome in this. He plays this weird, whacked out FBI agent that gets sick when women yell at him, like he actually gets physically sick and throws up. Like when the main girl of the film, played by Trina Alvarado, she kind of looks like a younger, hotter Andie MacDowell. She's yelling at him and he literally just gets sick and starts throwing up. It's hilarious.
It's okay?
And he's got all these whacked, weird piercings all over himself. Like he's into this whole other side. Like they could have written a whole other movie just about Jeffrey Combs' character, at least for me.
I'm wearing a lead breastplate!
But I love Reanimator and all that stuff. It's a huge homage to a lot of horror films, not only just having certain actors like Jeffrey Combs. They say things that make you feel like, oh, that's an homage to Poltergeist, or they do something that makes you feel like that's an homage to The Shining. You can feel it though, because it's Peter Jackson. He's a horror director. At least before Lord of the Rings he was. They do these cool things where they're flashbacking to the past with Jake Busey and showing his character as that serial killer. And the way they transition from the present to the past is really cool. It's very innovative for the time, and it's really well done. You really feel like you're watching old school footage. Michael J. Fox starts developing sort of these like paranormal powers to where you can kind of relive the scenes from that massacre, because that's the whole premise they're dealing with, is this ghost that's come back is Jake Busey's character that was that killer from the past. The one thing I forget to touch on though is the main girl, Trina Alvarado. Her husband, who he has an early fate in the film, but he's in the movie the whole time. He's hilarious. He's such a douchebag. Just the epitome of a 90s douchebag jock from that time. Like he's working out in their bedroom in that completely 90s house. Also, another thing, when she's in that bedroom watching the TV, really cool little scene, you can see right next to her TV, there's 3 little video cassette tapes, and it's Bad Taste, Heavenly Creatures, and Brain Dead. All of his previous films. But like I said, this movie's scary, but it's really funny at the same time. Like there's even unnecessary moments. Like I love it when Michael J. Fox at the beginning is going to visit that douchebag husband for their poltergeist, and he just rams over their fence. It's hilarious. I can't forget about the great R. Lee Ermey. Really cool. He plays a drill sergeant in this movie in a graveyard. So he's like the gravekeeper / drill sergeant, and that's a great homage to his role in Full Metal Jacket. He's essentially playing the same role in this, just a dead ghost version of it.
What the hell are you doing in my graveyard? You have been told to stay away! Sound off like you've got up here!
So the whole idea with these ghosts, because there's moments where the ghosts actually get killed by the Grim Reaper character, who's a ghost as well. So the whole idea with these ghosts floating around being able to communicate with humans, at least the way I take it, is that they're in purgatory. They're floating until they either go to heaven or hell, because there's scenes where you start to see the ghosts finally float up to heaven or actually go to the hell part. Which all those, if the effects would have been just a little better, I like the idea behind depicting that. I mean, the idea is pretty terrifying for hell and nice and glorious for heaven. And it starts making it look like Michael J. Fox is doing it. And everybody thinks in the town that he had killed his wife prior. He had an accident with his wife. Also, this movie's got a lot of gore. A lot of it is gore from the ghosts. I think they were able to get away with a lot more because of that, but it is gory though. There is a lot of gore at some points, and there's some pretty like dark imagery at moments, but it's also got a lot of emotional moments that it hits on. It's just a rich story. You get very into the characters, you're on your pins and needles by the end of it, and the third act is pretty intense. It gets pretty crazy. That's the most horror point of the film by the end. And after watching all this chaos ensue and this mystery unfold, and there's actually a message to the film. You actually get to learn something from it. But all in all, very ambitious movie, and I think it's awesome. I think it holds up very well. The comedy's still there, the acting's there, the direction, everything's there, the writing, music. Only thing that's a little iffy are the CGI effects at some points. But you can definitely see why they tapped Peter Jackson to do the Lord of the Rings trilogy after this, because he was going places. So Frighteners, ooh, some spooky bloody popcorn. Guys, that'll do it again for this second episode of the BrassReel Halloween. Join us tomorrow for our first of 4 throughout October of a BrassReel review. Me and old Andre are going to discuss a horror movie from the 80s. Tune in tomorrow to see what that one is. And remember, hit that like and subscribe button so you can say you helped us get famous. And hit that notification button so you can be notified exactly when these videos come out, because I know you're waiting for it on pins and needles. We'll look for BrassReel Brothers on Facebook, guys. You can find Bobby Williams on Facebook. Find me on Twitter, BrassReel Bobby at BrassReel. And remember, if life gives you lemons, make some hot bloody popcorn.